And as we roll into July of 1917, the Germans launch an attack here, taking this hex. They don't have the ability to advance very well into it. The problem here is things are getting weak. The French are going to come back. The Germans are going to come back. It's just going to be this sweeping back and forth for control of hexes. Now, the French have more forces, so they can do perhaps a one-stack attack and then maybe sweep further, maybe keep extending this line, creating a pocket here by driving up towards Sauerbach. I don't know. We'll see how the numbers work out and whether it's worth it. But the German position is still not good. They can sweep forward and attack, cause additional losses, but I don't think they're going to be able to do anything to keep this sector alive. They've been trying to shift troops over. They can rip some off of here, there's no question. They've got too many there, but it's a slow process to move things across. Of course, if you do it one hex at a time and just shuffle the whole front, you get a counter that way. Oh boy, is that a pain in the ass. But the other problem is the Germans are withdrawing units constantly to, I think these are building up their assault units. I haven't looked yet because the rule indicated to me what I thought was, hey, these units kind of come off and get replaced by assault units in situ. I don't think that's the case. That's the impression I had. I don't think that's the case of how the rules actually are stated. And I don't see any indication of it in this chart. What I think's happening is you're withdrawing specific units and they come back later as an assault unit, in which case I don't care what the numbers are on them. It just matters what the strength is, right? Well, but it does suck to have these units being pulled off the line because this part is getting weakened to the point the French could launch an attack. It's scary. It's really scary. This is the weakest part of both sides' lines, actually, down here. But the French have put a massive force. Their lines aren't any stronger. Their lines are actually vulnerable. The Germans could conceivably get a breakthrough, maybe up here or something, but what would it do? What would it do? Germans get kind of lucky. No new fires to put out, and they may actually want to make attacks on this hex now. This has been stripped in order to make offensives here. Pushing back, driving the French back, would definitely strengthen their position, shorten their line, and overall it looks kind of like a positive thing to do. And now the French are launching attacks without supplies. Basically no infantry supply. They supplied the tank and they supplied some artillery. Grabbed this hex. That's the cost for the Germans taking the hex they did. They couldn't defend what they had as well as they would have otherwise. And they lost a trench hex because of it. That's kind of painful. But you know, we're going to play this fast and loose this way and kind of see how things swing back and forth. It still ends up very much, you know, not these broad sweeping moves. It's not like mistakes cause that kind of breakthrough. It's still chunking away at the enemy. And it looks like we've entered into another peaceful period of retrenchment or whatever. The French have abandoned their offensives being out of supply. The British have not started one. They could use more supplies. There's no reason to start one off when they don't have very much there. Their army is mostly built up, but there's still a few pieces in there that I think I can dredge out additions for. There's, at the very least, this guy up here. That's 7 more strength points. So they can take some more reinforcements in terms of replacement points in play. The French have to rebuild their army. They did a lot of damage to it in these assaults. Largely, they have enough replacements on the board to do so. This probably ought to find its way somewhere. But it's going to take time and probably a couple of months to rebuild their supplies to a point where they want to attack again. I think they've given up on the ability to punch through here easily. They could have continued their actions, but they keep getting driven back. It's nothing too great that they're obtaining here. We'll see. One maybe high point, we're beginning to see U.S. engineers showing on the board. There aren't going to be a lot of U.S. troops showing up this year. It's really held off for 1918 and there are restrictions on how you can use them as well. The engineers obviously can build track, but it's kind of an encouragement to the Allies to see more forces showing up. And we're through 3 years of the war now as we hit, well, into August of 1917, minus a few days maybe. Nothing much happened. We've got some of the trench lines were finished at this point, and then some new ones showing up where things were a little chaotic at the beginning of this month. More supplies coming in? I don't know. The French are set up so that they'd kind of like to do a push, but they want to do that towards the end of the month so that they have a chance to follow it up with next month's supplies if need be. If things look too solid at the end of the month, they may just allow the trench lines to form. They've got although not many. They're not getting replacement tanks. Tanks don't come in replacements the way the infantry do. You don't just continuously start getting them so that you can plan. What it ends up being is, well, they're specified in here. They end up on there. You may have a vague feeling of them, but it's not something you can really say, yeah, I'm going to get one tank a month next turn. Nothing along those lines. Le Grand Gauche shows you that kind of production capability where yeah, I can expend my tanks because I'll have this many, or I'll be able to do an offensive in this month because of this. Here you'd have to look through the charts and try to figure it out from that. And those are a real headache to try to discern just what's coming in when you start perusing them. Really, it's better off, from my point of view, to just say, well, hell, I don't know when they're going to show up. Which isn't really the way to run a war, but it's about the only way for me to survive this game. Still not much happening. August went through without any additional attacks, mainly because the English couldn't find purchase anywhere that they want to hit. They have to make an attack very shortly, probably the first turn of this month, just in order to kill off some men so that they can start cycling their replacement points. They don't want to just waste them. One of the weird factors here, of course. The lines here became solid and entrenched at this point. And the French don't particularly want to launch an attack. They've got the shaken morale, so they're getting very, very low, only 30 supply points each turn, which makes it difficult for them to build up an attack capability. The Germans still have a very high capability to draw new units in, or new supply points in, but they have this huge level. They can reach up to 400 at this point, which means they don't have to attack quickly, and they can delay as they wait for their assault troops to come in. So nobody wants to attack at this point, but the Brits are going to be forced to early in this month. It's not going to be pretty at all for them, but it's really just going to be an attritional attack. Get rid of some of their own manpower, do some damage to the Germans. Their demoralization levels are good. Losing the manpower is okay from their point of view. It's what their goal is here. So it should work out okay. As expected, the English launched their massive attack. Some French support, some French artillery again being included in, just to reduce the cost in supplies. That cost in supplies was probably approximately half of what Britain had on the table, a little less than that. But they took a hex. The tanks, the strong firepower, etc. It didn't matter that there were 24 strength points there for the Germans. 24? Couldn't have been. It had to be less than that. Oh no, 24 indeed. Yeah, 15 losses is after the 2/3 situation. So without the tanks, I don't think it would have been a break, but it was not a tremendously high die roll. It was a 3, I think. So a higher die roll might have broken the line even without the armor. But, you know, when you get 190 strength points hitting one hex, and some of that is the tank. That's an extra 8 strength points in there. They can, because it doesn't count towards stacking, sort of. You can have 1 tank brigade or 3 battalions in 1 hex. I don't know what tank battalions are. I haven't seen any yet. But anyway, they punched in pretty easily. And now I think the Germans have to pull back again. They have to get out of this hex. They don't want to fight this war. They don't want to fight against the Brits here. The terrain's just not that valuable. They haven't decided where they want to launch their attacks. There's only one thing in France that they can really gain, other than casualties, that they desire. That's Paris. That's all that's left for them. The rest of France, well, you know, there's some small cities. Belfort, I think, is sitting on one. But there just aren't a lot of valuable territories to take from the French at this point. But Paris is the only thing that terrain-wise matters to them. The problem here is, well, if you take, you know, even if you take Paris, you don't collapse France. It doesn't look like it's a guarantee, but it'll push them further along that route. But the Germans have tightened up their line, and now they're beginning to get the assault troops in, and they've got to decide where they want to launch their attack. They want to go back for the same terrain that they just gave up. I mean, that's what they historically did, basically. Do they want to go up here where the terrain's a little cleaner and there might be less damaged territory? That damaged territory is harder to advance through. I don't know. I really don't know. But that's not this day's decision. This day's decision will be to run away from the British a little bit, to pull out and give up some ground. The question, of course, is do they want to give up this far? If they get pushed out of here, then this becomes the only real corner that they're presenting. And the English used the double hit tactic, hitting with a mobile attack first and then using 2 hexes to hit the hex. They didn't use the tanks in this, although those help a little bit. They don't help retreat the enemy necessarily. They ended up wiping out the German units that were in this hex. The first attack was not pleasant. It was like 27 losses for the Brits to 13 for the Germans. And you start to say, wow, why would you do that? Yeah, but that softened it enough that they could do 21-7 as the follow-up and get the hex. Overall, they're paying a slightly higher cost to get the hex, but they're collapsing the German line slowly and steadily. This game does allow you to do that as long as you have the supplies at this point. The Brits have so much power that they can just bludgeon their way through everything. And the Brits continue their kind of cautious pushing forward, just grinding into that German line. Another hex gained. This time they were surrounded by 3. They've got another, hex up here they could go after. Or down here. They've got this certain amount of flexibility where the Germans have to defend those couple of hexes pretty strong. They had defended the hex that got taken pretty strongly. The Brits basically threw everything in. They ran out of supplies on this. Their artillery, they drained them in and of itself, and they were able to partially supply the armor to get into this hex. That means that their strength point totals are just going to start decreasing on these attacks. So if the Germans can defend these corner spots fairly well, they become less attractive because the Brits can just wait. Those are entrenched already. It's these non-corner spots that are the risk. For this month and next month, while they're digging into those hexes, they're vulnerable. And those become the places where the Germans really have to defend, especially this one, which can be hit by 2 hexes. It is quite possible that the Brits could keep pushing and get behind this Hindenburg line stuff that they constructed, making it useless, basically. Okay, and well, the Brits decided to halt their attack for the reasons I was specifying. They need some time to shuffle things around, etc. So we stretched out through the rest of September. We're in October now. Let's take a look at the front from this side. I kind of like looking at it from all angles, but from here you really kind of see how much it's evened out So much more, and then this sharp jag here, of course, from the German side. Looks a little different. It always looks different when you walk around the board. I do like this view a lot, but I can't play it this way. I kind of need it facing me directly, so I end up speaking about it all the time, facing in a situation which doesn't really show the direction quite as much. Wow. Look at that. Anyway, up this one goes.